Hi everyone, Brandon Nerd here, and we're having another scientist story time because I love scientists, I love learning about scientists, and I love sharing my love of learning about scientists with you guys. Today we're going to be talking about probably my favorite women scientist of all times, and just overall favorite historical figure of all times, and that is Rosalind Franklin. So let's go ahead and dive into her life. Rosalind Franklin was born in 1920 in London, England, to a very affluent and influential Jewish family that gave her a lot of access to more education and science classes and resources at the time that typically wouldn't be available for a girl, especially a girl in a lower class family. She was described by one of her nannies as being, alarmingly clever, and from a really young age, she wanted to be a scientist. That's what she wanted to do. So she attended a girls' school specializing a lot in science for their high school, and then she ended up attending Newnham College at Cambridge, which was one of the only two schools at Cambridge which at the time even let women come to study. Even though she graduated with her bachelor's degree, women weren't actually awarded official degrees at the time, so she graduated with second-class high honors. She suffered a lot from test anxiety. So every single time she had to sit for one of her examinations, she would stress herself out, even though she usually ended up performing very well for herself. So if you also suffer from testing anxiety or assignment anxiety or something related to that, don't worry, you're in very good company with Rosalind Franklin. After, graduating, even though it wasn't a real degree, from Cambridge, she worked for the British Coal Utilization something Association. This is a government office in England that was studying the porosity or types of holes that existed in coal, the burning material. And this actually led to some advancements in gas masks that were used in England during World War II. So this was the formation or foundation for her PhD work, was studying the density, the holes in coal. Following World War II and her PhD work on coal, she moved from England over to Paris, France, and started working at an X-ray crystallography lab. X-ray crystallography is a scientific technique by which you can actually shoot X-rays at a crystalline or crystal object, and those X-rays will bounce off of it in a certain pattern depending on the structure of that crystal. So using a bunch of math and a bunch of science and measuring all of the angles between the patterns that result as a result of firing X-rays at the crystal, you can derive a lot of information about that molecule structure and shape. The structure of insulin, for example, which is used to help your body deal with sugar, it was actually determined through the use of X-ray crystallography. So Rosalind Franklin became really skilled at using X-ray crystallography, which, as you can imagine, is a really hard science to do. It involves a lot of math, a lot of measurements, a lot of very careful observation. And Rosalind was really good at careful observation, very good at being very meticulous about her lab work and all of that. She became very good at X-ray crystallography and took that expertise, and in 1951 moved back to England and started working at a biophysical lab in King's College. This is where things started to run into an issue for Rosalind Franklin. She ended up unintentionally entering a multinational race that was going on for determining the structure of DNA, and she also entered a not very friendly work environment. So a little bit about the DNA background. So at the time in history, so this is the 1950s, people knew what DNA was, and they knew it was responsible for passing down genetic information from parent to child. They didn't really know much else, or they knew a couple other things. They knew what it was made out of, a couple of things about the ratios or amounts of what it was made out of, but they didn't know what the structure was. And a lot of times in biology, the structure of a molecule will tell you a lot about its function and how it operates, and a lot more information about it. So the structure of DNA was a giant puzzle that the entire scientific community in all different countries, all different labs was trying to solve. And King's College was trying to solve that problem at the very same time. So Rosalind Franklin was recruited to work on DNA using her X-ray crystallography expertise. She was supposed to work with a scientist named Maurice Wilkins, but due to an unfriendly work environment and kind of, let's say, poor management, there was a lot of friction between the two of them over who was supposed to be in charge of who, even though they were kind of working together. And it just wasn't a very friendly environment, especially due to like sexist workplace and attitudes towards science at the time. So Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins weren't getting along very well together. And then this is a whole science drama, over at Cambridge, you also had James Watson and Francis Crick working on the same DNA problem. And James Watson and Francis Crick also kind of had negative attitudes, especially towards Rosalind Franklin, and kind of were friends with Maurice Wilkins, and they were all kind of friends, and Rosalind Franklin wasn't really their friend, and there was a lot of politics and stuff going on. Rosalind didn't care about any of this. She wasn't there to make friends. She wasn't there to play office or scientific politics. She was there to work on her research, gather her data, and make her conclusions. That is what she did in the workplace. That is who she was as a person. She didn't like other people in her workplace jumping to conclusions or misanalyzing their data. She was very meticulous. She got the information out of what she had, and she wasn't one to jump to conclusions, which is not how James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins behaved at all. And this even led to James Watson and his famous book, The Double Helix, which I thought I owned a copy of, but I think I banned it from my bookshelf because it wasn't as nice as all my women scientist books, where he said a lot of choice comments about her, and I'll read you one quote, and it says, though her features were strong, she was not unattractive and might have been quite stunning had she taken even a mild interest in clothes. This she did not. There was never lipstick to contrast with her straight black hair, while at the age of 31, her dresses showed all the imagination of English blue-stocking adolescents. So this is a quote from when James Watson was attending a lecture given by Rosalind Franklin, and instead of actually paying attention to any of the science in the lecture, he just made a bunch of comments about her appearance. I will not go on down a rabbit hole of how much this makes me mad. I'll just go on a quick one of just saying this really wasn't true about Rosalind at all. She took, even though it doesn't matter, she took a lot of great attention to her appearance. Outside of the workplace, she was described as being very friendly. She had a lot of hobbies. She liked to play sports. She liked to entertain dinner parties and all of this stuff. That was all what she did outside of the lab. Inside of the lab, she wanted to work. She wanted her reputation and appearance and all of that to be based on her science, which is not what James Watson was giving her the credit to do when he was criticizing her appearance when he should have been paying attention to her science. Anyhow, also, I don't think he was in any position to be commenting on somebody's appearance when all of the pictures of him at that stage in his life look like he had never seen a hairbrush. Anyhow, so there is this very strong friction going on between Maurice Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin, and then James Watson, Francis Crick, and the scientists at King's College, and it wasn't very pleasant. And even some of the impulsivity and kind of wrong data being churned out by James Watson and Francis Crick caused them to actually be temporarily banned from working on DNA at the time because it caused great embarrassment to the Cambridge lab. Lots of stuff going on, but let's go back to Rosalind. So in, I think, 1953, Rosalind was able to get a, it might have been 1952, 1953, Rosalind was able to get an incredibly clear X-ray crystallography photograph of DNA, and we call this photo photograph 51, and it is actually on my necklace, and if you can see, it is on the skirt of my dress. In this photograph, incredibly clear, one of the best that had been taken at the time, clearly denoted, just due to its X-shaped pattern, denoted that DNA was some sort of helical shape. This was kind of groundbreaking at the time. There was some evidence that it was helical, but nothing surefire. And Rosalind had gotten this photograph that was, once she had finished analyzing it, would have been a really good step in unlocking the structure of DNA. Now this is the photo that ended up, without Rosalind Franklin's knowledge, through the help of Maurice Wilkins, into James Watson and Francis Crick's hands. And this is the photo that they claim to be inspired by that led them to weeks of model building and eventually publishing the correct structure of DNA in 1963. And in that same journal that their discovery of the structure of DNA was published was Rosalind's work on this photograph and her X-ray crystallography data, all confirming this discovery that James Watson and Francis Crick had put out there. Rarely in science is, what am I trying to say? This was a gigantic discovery for scientists at the time, that DNA was a double helix, which is kind of this intertwined stair structure, and it gave all sorts of information about how DNA could replicate, how it carried information. It was a really big advance in the field of DNA and genetics and microbiology. Really awesome, and most of the credit all went to James Watson and Francis Crick, even though it had really been a team effort involving Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins. And some of the key information that enabled James Watson and Francis Crick to make their model came from Rosalind Franklin with none of her knowledge. Discoveries in science are rarely made by one person, so this was really a team effort, and you can debate or argue or have your own opinions about how unjust Rosalind was treated, but there was definitely some shady and rude things going on that prevented her from getting the full credit she deserved at the time for the amount of hard work that she had put in for it. Following, very shortly after this was published, actually even just before I think this was published, Rosalind made a move to a different laboratory and started working on, so she moved from DNA and started working on RNA, which is very similar to DNA, and viruses, and worked on like viral proteins and that. She died at the age of, I believe, 36 from cancer that was due to all of the x-rays she got exposed to over the years of doing x-ray crystallography, because at the time we didn't really fully understand the extent that x-rays could harm us, so she got herself exposed to a lot of x-rays in her work and developed cancer and died at a really young age from that. In 1963, James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins were all awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine and Physiology for the discovery of the structure of DNA. And Rosalind Franklin was not honored in any sort of way, and this was due to the fact she had already passed, and Nobel Prizes were not awarded posthumously or to somebody after they have died. But if she was alive, who knows if she still would have gotten it due to, again, sexist and misogynistic attitudes towards women in science at the time. So kind of a sad note, Rosalind Franklin's life was unfortunately short and not full of a lot of appreciation for her talents and her skills and her very direct attitude towards her work and how much she loved it. I personally love Rosalind Franklin because I see a lot of similarities between her and myself. We both did debate growing up. We both really enjoyed science and are very careful, have a high attention to details. Also don't really care for people who like to joke around in the workplace and try to jump to conclusions that aren't unfounded, but that's just me. And despite the fact that her life was so short and she didn't get a lot of credit for it, we can remember her today and remember all of the work she put in to making this groundbreaking discovery for the structure of DNA. And she even made some really important discoveries for viral proteins and how those work as well. Today's fun fact, we're gonna end on a fun note. Today's fun fact I want us to rate is that if you were to take your DNA and unravel it, it would stretch all the way from here to Pluto and back. So your DNA is very efficiently packed into your body. Please be sure to drop that rating for the fun fact in the comments below. Like this video, share it with your friends. Again, tell all your friends about Rosalind Franklin. Homegirl needs some attention because she is pretty awesome. I will put some links to some of my favorite books where I learned a lot about her down in the description. Please follow me on Instagram. I post some things on there about fun science field trips I like to take and about when videos get uploaded. I will continue to post videos every Tuesday and Friday and keep it sciencey.